Hi everyone, I am Serhat, Managing Director of OMD Media Group's Diversity and Inclusion Marketing Division for Client Outputs. I'll be taking you through the diversity effect, the impact and the value today. What we do is to help our clients engage the growing communities of diverse cultures. And our division was set up a decade ago. However, I only took over about 3.5 years ago. And previously I worked across spectrum of marketing, PR and advertising. What really brought me to this role was the fact that I've always felt minorities were never represented properly in marketing. But to give you a bit of context, obviously I'm a bit of an extreme version that I was born and bred in Turkey to a very controversial mix of Turkish and Kurdish family and married to the love of my life, who is from a very mixed background and from a different continent as well. So the differences we have become a lot more apparent. And because of the way I am at work, at home with my family or my in-laws, they're all different. For instance, when I'm with my side of the family, we are very loud when we talk because we've got that Middle Eastern affectionate blood in us. And whereas when I'm with my wife's Chinese side of the family, I'm very quiet because being loud is considered to be very mature. And additionally, I'm exposed to various different media points whenever I visit my in-laws or my relatives. And one of the funny facts is that I see my in-laws almost every day, which my British friends find hilarious. But there are some fundamental errors in the way we respond to briefs when it comes to advertising and marketing. What we do is, on the left side, as you can see, the things that we usually consider as basics. So we slice and dice data by age, gender, socioeconomic status, occupation, and education. However, we never look at things that affect us a lot more, such as ethnicity, faith, sexuality, different attitudes and values that might be driven by who we are. And these things actually affect us a lot more as human beings. The way we are seen by others, who we look up to, what we consume and when, and the content and media we consume, the way we speak, and in some cases, such as religious purposes, it even affects the way we dress. On one side, we have these multicultural agencies who are very specialist and focus mainly on products specifically made for ethnic minorities. And on the other side, we had major network agencies who almost ignored these demographics unless the brief specifically mentioned something to do with ethnicity or religion. And from a general diversity and inclusion perspective, a lot of the talk has been on people and culture side of it, whereas no one really looks at the actual work part of it. So what we wanted to do was to change that. So 4 years ago, we've done something different. Started moving clients from unconscious exclusion to what we call conscious inclusion. And what that means is looking at mainstream briefs, any briefs with diversity lenses by the very diverse communities that we want to reach. And we are happy to say that it really works. We went from having 3 clients in 7 years to 40 plus clients in the last 3-4 years alone. And on top of it, we went from having 1 award to 7 awards in the last 3 years. And the reason I wanted to mention this is that this is a proven case that it works. It works for both clients and agencies. So everyone should be doing this. But what I wanted to do is this section to be a very practical things that you can take back and implement in your day-to-day work. So fundamental points that I'm going to go through is divided into 3. The first one is we need to understand there are challenges, but also benefits in inclusive outputs. On the media side, there are barriers and challenges in inclusive media approach. When we look at offline, for instance, minorities are usually excluded or not properly represented in media measurement panels or the tools that we use for planning and buying purposes. If you take Barb as an example, which has 5,000 households in their panel to get the ratings and measure them, although it's got an 7% of, although it's got an overall representation of multicultural communities within their panels, one study by Ofcom found only 7% of that viewing came from ethnic minorities. And if you were to equate that to the number of households, that is about 350. And if you break that down by the number of ethnicities and the differences, not only between these groups, but also within them, it becomes almost impossible to get an accurate measurement, which is why you will see a lot of media plans that will say you reach 90% of the population, when in reality, it's not. And on the online side, things are a bit different. Although everything is measurable, there are different challenges. On the one side, there are exclusion and inclusion lists, which are also known as white or black lists, which I would highly recommend that you don't use anymore and change them to inclusion and exclusion lists, which we did about 4 years ago. And in most cases, these inclusion lists will not include diverse media outlets because they tend to be very small. Hence, these lists tend to be focused on mainstream media sites. And another challenge we have is the keyword blocking. Words such as Muslim, gay, lesbian, or interracial are some of the most blocked keywords. What that means is our ads are not showing up in the very content or media diverse communities consume. Research company Check analyzed 15 different LGBTQ plus media owners. And then what they found was 73% of LGBTQ safe news and stories were blocked as part of brand safety measures. However, when done right, inclusion and diversity media can have many benefits. For instance, despite the limitations mentioned on the previous slides, we have our own study, which we use for planning and buying purposes, shows that 16% of ethnic minorities only consume multicultural media. And those tend to be the first generation consumers or the first generation audiences who moved here from a different country. And then 60% of them consume both mainstream media as well as multicultural media. And then you also have the 18% that only consumes mainstream media, who tend to be the second or third generation or further generations. What that means is by using multicultural media, you can drive incremental reach and frequency. And on the other side, context and content is very important as well. Although not talked about as being diverse or BME community, Polish audiences, as an example, has the biggest language barrier here in the UK, with 30% of them not being able to speak English, which is why Polish ads works 3 times better than English ads. And the similar approach can be taken onto LGBTQ plus communities as well. By the way, this doesn't mean you have to have a bespoke creative for them all the time, but you need to make sure that your creative is accessible and relevant to them. But more importantly, I think there is another point that everyone forgets. Diverse media outlets are run by the very diverse communities that we want as our employees, as our consumers. Hence, although some of the media types such as social would reach them, there is a different value, equity value in using them as well. So the second point is you need to make diversity and inclusion part of your DNA for your outputs. And by that, we mean you need to integrate it in everything you do versus treating them as a one-off or a cultural event. So to give you an example, I would recommend everyone to question what you do with diversity lenses. And this is exactly what we do in our team, be it ethnicity, religion, sexuality, or disability, or faith. Ask your questions. Is your earned or paid media outlets, are they diverse enough? Do they include diversity media as part of them? Is your research and databases that you have a representation of ethnic minorities, as an example? For instance, nationally representative product research could technically have no one from a multicultural LGBTQ or disability backgrounds because it is based on age, gender, or locations. Hence, it is the standard, and you might be basing your decision on something that has no one from a diverse background. And the same goes for partnerships, events, creative, influencers, content creators as well. So to give you an example, I'm going to show you something that we've done for a client of ours. So this client had a persona called Becky, their target audience or the audience that they want to reach. And what we did was we took that Becky and using different data sources to replicate and find out who these Beckys were, when in reality, 29%. So almost a third of Beckies were not Beckies. And then what we did was the convenience was a key element of that client. So we then matched their store catchment areas by the ethnicity makeup of those stores, and found out that 20% of their potential customers that may come to their stores were from a non-white British background. And this literally fed into in everything we do from events and content perspective. Last but most important point is inclusive work culture is not the answer to inclusive outputs. You can have a workplace where people feel and act as they were and be authentic to themselves, but that doesn't mean that it creates to inclusive outputs, because it's very different. As an example, something can only be learned via lived experiences. Hence, the culture must be represented and led by those from the culture versus stealing that culture. We need to understand that representing and reflecting the makeup of our society and people is not as simple as it sounds. And they are not one big homogeneous group that will drive inclusivity in our outputs. While we may create an inclusive work culture where everyone can be just themselves, there are 18 different ethnic groups with differences not only between them, but also within them. Africa is made up of 54 countries alone. And if you add the number of religions, sexuality, and disability, and overlay that by the tens of divisions, teams, and we have on both the client side and agency side, it is technically impossible to have a fully representative team at each and individual stage of our marketing and advertising. So this is also the reason why we still see stereotypical work, because inclusive planning and inclusive work will only need to be done by the communities themselves. And to do that, you can't have one consultant that works on you or have a few people from diverse backgrounds in your teams. It needs to be in every stage, which is why we exist as a specialist as well, because culture needs to be represented by the people from that culture. So I'm going to show you a case study in SBCC work that we did 2 years ago. Although to some it may come across as stereotypical because we use grime music as a way to engage these communities, the key difference is that grime is British, and as British, as Black British as it gets. And what we did was, rather than creating something and putting it on them, we co-created the work with these artists themselves.
Anxiety, exams, falling out, fitting in. It's tough being a teenager. Now imagine it with this on top. Children's charity NSPCC operates the listening service Childline. They'd noticed an increase in racial, faith-based bullying. Young Muslims have been called terrorists. Children of European descent have been told to go home. Terror attacks, Brexit, and right-wing rhetoric have fueled it further. So, Understand Me was launched to tackle this hate and discrimination against young people. But we knew they wouldn't connect with it if it didn't represent them. So our job, to create a campaign that would convince children from BAME backgrounds that Childline was there for them and there to help. We were fueled by the insight. You can only be it if you can see it. If young people can't see others like them as role models, they're less likely to follow a path and succeed. Research and instinct helped us find the people they would respond to. People who looked like them, sounded like them, from their neighbourhoods. We selected SBTV, the UK's most credible youth platform and grime music publisher, as our partner. Up-and-coming grime artists from different backgrounds with personal experiences of discrimination created original songs specifically for the campaign. Eyes tackled Islamophobia. Big Zoo took on xenophobia. See Kane challenge racism. We amplified with different creatives across Facebook, Instagram and Snapchat, featuring a minute-long film produced by Don't Panic. We built bespoke audience segments based on different ethnicities and religious affinities. Don't Panic then created different, tailored cuts of the film, so we could deliver super targeted, relevant content to each audience segment, living up to Understand Me's campaign promise. The results? 15 million impressions. Trust in Childline shifted a record 33%, and most importantly, 22% increase in counselling sessions for BAME teens, all in just 6 weeks.
Just because my skin's a different color doesn't mean it's any thicker.
So yeah, I hope you found this session useful, and feel free to get in touch with me if you have any questions. Thank you.